Some mysteries fade with time, while others become even more fascinating as the years pass. More than 50 years ago, one ordinary-looking passenger boarded a commercial flight and created the only unsolved airplane hijacking in American history. He demanded a fortune, disappeared into the night, and was never seen again. No confirmed identity has ever been established. No body has ever been recovered. The world remembers him by one name: D.B. Cooper. His story began on November 24, 1971. It was the day before Thanksgiving in the United States, one of the busiest travel days of the year. Airports were crowded with families, business travelers, and students returning home for the holiday. Among those travelers was a man who attracted almost no attention. He appeared to be in his mid-40s and carried himself with remarkable confidence. He wore a dark business suit, a white shirt, a narrow black tie, and polished black shoes. A black raincoat rested over one arm. In his hand was a simple black briefcase. Nothing about him suggested he was about to make history. He walked to the Northwest Orient Airlines ticket counter without hesitation. He purchased a one-way ticket for Flight 305 from Portland to Seattle. The ticket cost $20. He paid entirely in cash. The name written on the ticket was Dan Cooper. No one asked him to present identification. In 1971, airport security was dramatically different from today's standards. Passengers were not required to pass through metal detectors. Carry-on luggage was not scanned. Buying a ticket and boarding an aircraft was surprisingly simple. Cooper calmly made his way toward the departure gate. He showed no signs of nervousness. He never looked over his shoulder. He never appeared rushed. To everyone around him, he looked like an ordinary businessman catching a short afternoon flight. Flight 305 was operated using a Boeing 727. The aircraft had a unique design that would later become extremely important. Unlike most passenger airplanes, it featured a staircase that could be lowered from the rear of the aircraft. Few people considered that design unusual at the time. Soon, it would become the center of one of aviation's greatest mysteries. Cooper boarded the aircraft and selected seat 18C near the back of the cabin. He politely greeted the flight attendants as they welcomed passengers aboard. Witnesses would later describe him as quiet, courteous, and surprisingly calm. After takeoff, he ordered a bourbon and soda. He lit a cigarette, something that was completely normal on commercial flights during that era. He slowly looked out the window while enjoying his drink. Nothing about his behavior suggested panic or excitement. Several minutes later, he called one of the flight attendants, Florence Schaffner, to his seat. Without speaking much, he handed her a folded piece of paper. Assuming it was another passenger flirting with her, she slipped the note into her purse without reading it. Cooper leaned slightly toward her and quietly said that she should read the note because he had a bomb. Florence immediately unfolded the paper and realized the threat was real. Trying to remain calm, she sat beside him as instructed. Cooper slowly opened his briefcase just enough for her to see inside. She saw several red cylindrical objects connected by wires and what appeared to be a battery. Whether the device was genuine has never been confirmed, but it looked convincing enough to leave no room for doubt. Florence quickly informed the cockpit without alarming the passengers. The pilots immediately contacted air traffic control and informed federal authorities. Despite the shocking situation, the flight continued toward Seattle while negotiations quietly began. Cooper remained completely composed as he explained exactly what he wanted. He demanded $200,000 in $20 bills, 4 parachutes, and a fuel truck waiting in Seattle. He warned the crew not to attempt any tricks because everyone's safety depended on following his instructions. As Flight 305 continued north through the cloudy afternoon sky, no passenger realized that only a few seats away, history was quietly unfolding. As Flight 305 approached Seattle, the atmosphere inside the cockpit grew increasingly tense. The pilots remained in constant communication with air traffic controllers and the FBI. Every instruction Cooper gave was carefully relayed to authorities on the ground. No one wanted to risk provoking the hijacker. The aircraft was instructed to circle the area while the ransom was prepared. This bought investigators valuable time to gather everything Cooper had demanded. Banks across Seattle worked at extraordinary speed to collect the money. Employees counted thousands of $20 bills by hand. Before the cash left the bank, every serial number was recorded. Agents believed those numbers might eventually lead them to the hijacker. If Cooper ever spent the money, investigators hoped someone would recognize the bills. The ransom was packed into a large canvas bag. Attention then turned to the parachutes. Cooper had requested 4 of them instead of 1. The demand puzzled investigators. Some believed he planned to take a hostage during the jump. Others suspected he simply wanted to prevent authorities from sabotaging the equipment. If even one innocent person might be forced to use a parachute, the FBI could not risk providing a defective one. Real parachutes were therefore delivered exactly as requested. Several hours after takeoff, Flight 305 finally landed in Seattle. Emergency vehicles surrounded the aircraft from a safe distance. Police officers and FBI agents watched every movement through binoculars. No one approached the airplane without permission. The engines remained running while the exchange was prepared. The fuel truck arrived first and began refueling the aircraft. Shortly afterward, the ransom money was carefully carried aboard. The parachutes followed moments later. Cooper inspected everything without showing much emotion. He appeared satisfied that his demands had been met. He then surprised everyone by releasing every passenger. One by one, all 36 passengers safely left the aircraft. Many still had no idea how dangerous the situation had actually been. Some believed the delay had been caused by a mechanical problem. Others only realized they had survived a hijacking after reaching the terminal. Not a single passenger had been injured. Not a single shot had been fired. Only the flight crew remained on board. Captain William Scott stayed in the cockpit with First Officer William Ratitzak and Flight Engineer Harold Anderson. Flight Attendant Tina Mucklow also remained because Cooper wanted her assistance. Outside the aircraft, investigators wondered what Cooper would do next. Most believed he intended to surrender after receiving the money. Instead, he calmly gave the pilots a new set of instructions. He wanted to fly toward Mexico City. The aircraft was to remain below 10,000 feet. Its speed could not exceed approximately 200 knots. The wing flaps were to stay partially extended throughout the flight. He also wanted the landing gear configured for a low-speed journey whenever possible. Most importantly, he intended to use the aircraft's rear staircase after takeoff. The pilots explained that the Boeing 727 could not reach Mexico without stopping for fuel. After a brief discussion, Cooper accepted a refueling stop in Reno, Nevada. He showed no frustration and calmly approved the revised route. His knowledge of the aircraft impressed the flight crew. He seemed to understand its capabilities better than many ordinary passengers ever could. As darkness settled over the Pacific Northwest, Flight 305 prepared for departure once again. This time, there were no passengers in the cabin. There were only 4 crew members and one mysterious man carrying a bag filled with $200,000. At approximately 7:40 p.m., the aircraft lifted off into the rainy night. Within minutes, Seattle disappeared behind them, and D.B. Cooper quietly began preparing for the most daring escape in aviation history. The lights of Seattle quickly disappeared behind Flight 305 as the aircraft headed south. Outside, darkness covered the Pacific Northwest. Heavy rain struck the fuselage while strong winds pushed against the aircraft. Below them stretched endless forests, rivers, and rugged mountains. It was one of the most dangerous places imaginable to attempt a parachute jump. Inside the cabin, however, Cooper remained calm. He showed no signs of panic or hesitation. The bag containing the ransom money rested beside him. He carefully opened one of the parachute packs. He examined the harness with surprising confidence. Investigators would later believe he understood parachuting better than he admitted. He selected one of the main parachutes for the jump. He then opened one of the reserve parachutes. Instead of wearing it, he removed several lengths of parachute cord. Using those cords, he tied the heavy bag of money securely around his body. Every movement appeared deliberate and carefully planned. Nothing suggested he was improvising. Meanwhile, the pilots continued following his instructions exactly. The aircraft maintained a low altitude. Its speed remained close to 200 knots. The cockpit door stayed closed throughout the flight. Cooper had ordered the crew not to leave the cockpit under any circumstances. Only Flight Attendant Tina Mucklow remained briefly in the cabin. Before long, Cooper instructed her to join the pilots. She quietly entered the cockpit and closed the door behind her. From that moment forward, Cooper was completely alone. No one would ever see him again. Several minutes passed in complete silence. The crew could hear only the steady sound of the engines and the rain outside. Then a warning light appeared inside the cockpit. It indicated that the rear staircase had been lowered. Captain Scott contacted Cooper through the intercom and warned him that opening the stairs in flight could be dangerous. There was no reply. The silence continued. The aircraft shook violently as cold air rushing into the open staircase. The crew remained focused on flying the airplane safely. No one attempted to leave the cockpit. A few minutes later, the pilots felt a sudden movement. The nose of the aircraft lifted slightly before returning to normal. It was a small change, but experienced pilots immediately recognized its significance. A considerable amount of weight had just disappeared from the rear of the aircraft. Captain Scott exchanged a brief glance with the flight engineer. Neither man needed to say anything. They both believed Cooper had jumped. Somewhere below them, hidden by darkness and heavy rain, a single man was falling toward the earth. The jump was extraordinarily risky. The outside temperature was close to freezing. The wind was powerful enough to throw a parachutist far from the intended landing area. Visibility was almost non-existent. If Cooper survived, he would likely land deep inside remote wilderness. If he failed, search teams might never recover his body. Flight 305 continued toward Reno exactly as planned. The crew had no way of knowing whether Cooper was alive or dead. When the aircraft finally landed, armed FBI agents rushed aboard within seconds. They searched every corner of the cabin. The money was gone. One parachute was missing. Only Cooper's black clip-on tie remained on seat 18C, silently marking the place where one of history's greatest mysteries had begun. Within minutes of Flight 305 landing in Reno, the FBI began one of the largest investigations in its history. Agents carefully searched every inch of the aircraft for evidence. The cabin appeared almost untouched. The ransom money had disappeared. One parachute was missing. Only Cooper's black clip-on tie and a few personal items remained behind. Investigators immediately collected every piece of evidence they could find. The tie would later become one of the most valuable clues in the entire case. Attention then shifted toward the suspected jump zone. Search teams were dispatched before sunrise. Helicopters flew low over dense forests. Police officers searched remote logging roads. National Guard soldiers combed the wilderness on foot. Divers examined nearby rivers and lakes. Search dogs followed every possible trail. Days passed without success. Weeks turned into months. Despite the enormous effort, investigators found nothing that could be linked directly to Cooper. No parachute was recovered, no clothing was discovered, no briefcase appeared, no body was ever found. The complete absence of evidence puzzled everyone involved. Some investigators concluded that Cooper could not have survived the jump. They pointed to the freezing temperatures and violent weather that night. He had jumped wearing a business suit rather than proper outdoor clothing. The terrain below was covered with thick forests and steep hillsides. Even experienced skydivers considered the conditions extremely dangerous. Others strongly disagreed with that conclusion. They believed Cooper had carefully planned every detail of the operation. He knew exactly which aircraft to hijack. He understood the safest altitude for a parachute jump. He requested 4 parachutes for reasons that appeared highly strategic. He remained calm throughout the entire hijacking. Nothing about his behavior suggested panic or inexperience. The FBI began investigating possible suspects across the United States. Former military paratroopers quickly attracted attention. Professional skydivers were questioned. Aircraft mechanics and airline employees were interviewed. Engineers with knowledge of the Boeing 727 also became subjects of interest. Thousands of tips arrived from the public. Some callers claimed they knew Cooper personally. Others believed a relative or neighbor matched the famous composite sketch. Every promising lead was carefully investigated. One by one, however, the theories collapsed. No fingerprints matched. No handwriting samples provided a definitive answer. No suspect could be connected to the ransom money. Years continued to pass with no major breakthrough. As technology improved, investigators returned to Cooper's tie. Modern forensic analysis revealed tiny metallic particles trapped within the fabric. Those particles suggested that Cooper may have worked around advanced industrial materials, possibly in aerospace or heavy manufacturing. The discovery generated new theories, but no confirmed identity. The case became more mysterious with every passing decade. Instead of revealing who Cooper was, each new clue seemed to create even more unanswered questions. The man who had boarded Flight 305 under the name Dan Cooper was beginning to look less like a criminal and more like a ghost. Then, almost 9 years after the hijacking, an unexpected discovery along the Columbia River shocked investigators and reignited the entire case. Nearly 9 years passed without a major breakthrough in the investigation. Many people believed the mystery would never be solved. Then, on February 10, 1980, an unexpected discovery changed everything. An 8-year-old boy named Brian Ingram was camping with his family near the Columbia River at a place known as Tina Bar. While digging in the sand, he uncovered several bundles of badly decayed $20 bills. The money appeared to have been buried for years. Local authorities were immediately notified. The FBI quickly arrived at the scene and collected the bills for examination. Investigators compared the serial numbers with the list created on the day of the hijacking. The results stunned everyone involved. The money belonged to D.B. Cooper's ransom. Approximately $5,800 had been recovered. It was the first confirmed physical evidence linking the hijacking to any location after the jump. Instead of solving the mystery, however, the discovery raised even more questions. No one could explain how the money reached the riverbank. Some believed floodwaters had carried it downstream. Others argued that Cooper or another person had intentionally buried it there. None of the theories could be proven. The remaining ransom money has never been found. The investigation continued for decades. Hundreds of suspects were examined over the years. Several men appeared to match the famous FBI sketch. Some had military backgrounds. Others possessed aviation knowledge. A few even confessed to the crime before their deaths. Every confession eventually collapsed under careful investigation. The physical evidence never supported the claims. Modern forensic science brought renewed hope. DNA testing was performed using material recovered from Cooper's tie. Unfortunately, the sample was incomplete and could not identify a single individual with certainty. Investigators also continued studying the microscopic particles found on the tie. Some experts believed they pointed towards someone employed in the aerospace industry during the 1960s. Others warned that the evidence was far from conclusive. After more than 4 decades of investigation, the FBI made an important announcement. In 2016, the Bureau officially suspended active investigation into the case. Resources would instead be directed toward newer criminal investigations. The files would remain available if credible evidence ever emerged. Even so, no official solution had been reached. More than half a century has now passed since that rainy November evening. No confirmed photograph of Cooper after the jump has ever surfaced. No verified witness has ever claimed to meet him. No one has successfully spent enough of the ransom money to expose his identity. The case remains the only unsolved commercial airplane hijacking in American history. Some people believe Cooper died during the jump and was simply never found. Others believe he landed safely and quietly disappeared into a new life. Both theories remain possible because the evidence is incomplete. Perhaps that uncertainty explains why the story continues to capture imaginations around the world. It is more than a crime story. It is a mystery that has survived generations of investigators, journalists, and amateur detectives. Every new theory brings fresh debate but no final answer. Every documentary ends with the same unanswered question. Who was D.B. Cooper? Until convincing evidence appears, the truth remains hidden somewhere between history and legend. A quiet man boarded Flight 305 carrying only a briefcase. A few hours later, he stepped into a storm with $200,000 strapped to his body. Whether he died that night or escaped forever is something only one person ever truly knew. If he survived, he carried one of history's greatest secrets to the very end. And that is why, more than 50 years later, the legend of D.B. Cooper continues to live on.